Well, hey there, everyone. It's Mrs. Asaro here with another First Chapter Friday. If you are watching this at the time I record it, we are at the end of football season and the Super Bowl is coming up in a couple of weeks. So I thought it would be really fun to do a book that's centered around football. So I naturally went to one of my favorite middle school authors, Mike Lupica, who was an actual sports writer and who has written many books like Travel Team and Heat. But this one is centered around football, and it is called The Underdogs, again by Mike Lupica. Before we begin, I want to make sure that you have your First Chapter Friday sheet. It is free. I will link it in the show notes, and you can print out a bunch of them and keep them in a reading notebook, so when it comes time for your next read, you'll have something to refer to. Okay? So before we get into the first chapter, let's hear a little bit about the book. I'm just going to read to you from the book jacket. Will Tyler is about the fastest thing on two legs in Forbes, Pennsylvania. Hand him the football and give him an opening, and that's 6 on the scoreboard, no doubt. But Will's speed may not be enough to save the team's season. When the Forbes Flyers, the sneaker company that employed half the townspeople, closed its doors and turned out its lights for the last time, the life of the town went out with it, and so did the money. Now, when the town announces that they can't finance the team, Will throws a Hail Mary pass that just might save the season and give Forbes something to cheer about. Okay. So let's take a listen to Chapter 1 of The Underdogs. And I really do like the style of print for the chapters because it looks like a football jersey. Just about everybody who'd ever seen Will Tyler play said the same thing, that he could fly on the football field. He was definitely flying now. Ball tucked firmly in the bend of his arm, open field in front of him, a slight wind at his back. Not that he needed it. At midfield, he made an effortless cut to his left, switching the ball from his right hand to his left in the process. Will did it without even thinking, did it on instinct, one more move that nobody had to teach him. Not even his dad, who'd been a star running back in this same town on the same field. Back when the field was in much better shape, and the town was too. But Will's dad always said that even on his best days, all the way through high school, he was never as fast as Will. "You've got that gear," he told Will once. "What gear?" "That extra gear that the great ones have," Joe Tyler said. Will shifted into that gear now. Flying, like the wind at Shea Field, wasn't just behind him, it was trying to keep up with him. At the 30, he cut back again, back to his right, angling toward the sideline. Switching the ball back to his right hand, imagining that he was watching himself on one of those giant screens most NFL stadiums have now, pretending he was trying to see if anybody was gaining on him, knowing that nobody would be. 20-yard line now, 15, only the end zone ahead of him. And that's when he went down. He hadn't been tackled. He'd stepped into a hole at the 5-yard line. He hadn't seen it because he had his eye on the prize, like always, just felt his right foot go into it, the leg collapsing like he'd been tripped, like he'd been caught from behind, just like that. Will was mad. The beat-up field at Shea was the only thing that could stop him, and it had cost him a touchdown. Of course he knew it could have been worse. He could have rolled an ankle or hurt his knee the way his dad did once. It had been his senior year in high school. His dad hadn't stepped into a hole, though. He'd just made a cut into the secondary and thought he was about to break into the clear when he got hit by tacklers from both sides. at the same exact moment, their helmets meeting at his right knee. In so many ways, too many ways for Will to even count, it was a hit from which Dad still hadn't recovered. Will had gone down hard, but knew he was all right. Knew he would have no trouble getting back up. The only burn he was feeling now was embarrassment. The same he'd felt last season after the fumble against Castle Rock. He sat there, a ball under his arm, thinking, "It's a good thing I'm alone." Alone with his ball, alone on this field, no teammates or opponents there to see him trip and go down, nobody to see somebody this good at football look so bad. He turned and saw how deep the hole was. One of many at Shea Field, a field that the town seemed to have forgotten, or maybe just given up on, the way it was about to give up on a football team and a football season for 12-year-olds like Will Tyler. The town council of Forbes had made it clear a couple of weeks earlier that there wasn't enough money in the budget to finance all the local sports teams as it had been in the past. They'd said that some of the younger age groups might have to suffer so that no programs were cut at Forbes High School. They said it was more expensive than ever to finance football teams, telling the parents there had been barely enough in the budget to let Will's 11-year-old team compete last season in the West River Youth Football League. Forbes' version of Pop Warner. Now, unless somebody in town could come up with the money in a few weeks, enough money to cover membership in the league, helmets, uniforms, field maintenance, emergency services, insurance, what Will's dad called the full boat, there would be no football for 12-year-olds this year. No team, no practices, no games, no shot at the league title Forbes had come within a touchdown of winning last season. Maybe, Will thought, alone on this field, 2 yards short of the end zone, a run like this in an imaginary game would be the only kind he would get to make this year. That was a short chapter. I'm just going to read you a little bit of chapter 2. I'm going to stop at a natural break. You know, when you kind of see that spacing and it indicates a shift in a scene. I'll read a little bit more. Chapter 2. Will felt as if his football was about to leave Forbes the way the sneaker factory had. Technically, the factory hadn't left, he knew. It was still there on the river, only it was empty now the way it had been for most of Will's life. It was the business that had left, the business that used to make Forbes Flyers, once one of the most famous athletic shoe brands in the country. That was before other companies began to dominate the business with cool sneakers of every color for every sport. And even color catchphrases and commercials with endorsements from the hottest athletes. Those other companies became what his dad called superpowers of the sneaker business, and they have wiped out Forbes Flyers like powerful armies invading a tiny nation. It wasn't that Nike or any other were doing anything wrong, Joe Tyler told Will once. They were just selling shoes and giving the people what they wanted. But in the process, it was like they wiped out the world we'd grown up in, the one built around the factory. Now his dad wondered how Forbes Flyers had held on as long as they had before the shoes with the cool wings logo finally just disappeared. When they did, the factory where his dad had worked and his grandfather before him went with them. Some of the people who had worked there found other jobs in Forbes. A lot more moved away. Will knew all about it by now, the sad history of the business and the town, just because he'd grown up hearing his dad talk about it so much. With like somehow his own life story was tied up with the story of Forbes Flyers. It was like a book Will had not just read, but reread, a movie he had seen over and over again. Families gone, friends gone, houses empty and yards ignored. Will was pretty sure that the only successful business in Forbes was the one that printed the for sale signs. And yet across the river sat the town of Castle Rock, home of Castle Rock Springs, the bottled water company that was thriving. It was only a few miles from Forbes to Castle Rock. To Will, it felt like the people who lived there, the kids growing up there, were on the other side of the world. A world people moved to and not away from. A world where people didn't worry about abandoned neighborhoods and empty factories and football seasons lost. Guys Will's age were going to have a season over there, that was for sure. Another great season, no doubt. The kind they always seemed to have, playing on a 2-year-old turf field that was in better condition than most of the high school fields in the area. Wearing the new uniforms they got every single year. There were a lot of days when Will would sit by himself on the river and just stare at the world across the water, wanting to be over there, wanting to play on their team. He never said that out loud to anybody, certainly not to his dad. He would never say anything in front of his dad that sounded like whining or complaining. No way. Not when he knew the story of his dad's life, knew how hard he had worked to take care of Will from the time his mom had died, back when Will was just 2 years old. How hard his dad was still working. It didn't change the fact that Will thought he was growing up on the wrong side of the river. And I'm going to stop there. I hope that you will consider taking out this book, especially before the end of the football season, because I think that it will get you in that good atmospheric reading mood. If you have any books that you would like to see featured on my channel, make sure that you drop a comment. And until then, happy reading, and I'll see you next Friday.